Hello, book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today, I thought I would do a tag that I recently saw Sid Bookworm doing, and it's called the telephone book tag. So from what I understand, the telephone book tag is based off of the game Telephone, where you whisper something into someone's ear and they whisper it into the next person's ear, and we see if the last person who speaks out has the same phrase that was initially stated. In this case, instead of with a phrase, we are doing it with book covers. So I figured it would be kind of fun to show off a few of my book covers, maybe talk about some books that I haven't talked about before. Now, keep in mind, I do not have as many books as some of the larger booktubers, so some of these might be slightly stretching it, but I will try to explain it as much as possible. I decided to go up to 10 books for this list. As far as choosing what book I wanted to start with, I decided to just start with the book that I was currently reading, which turned out to be a little bit hard because it has a cover that isn't really similar to anything else I own. But we'll go ahead and get started and see how it goes. All right, so the book that I'll be starting with, what I'm currently reading, is A Skin Full of Shadows by Frances Hardening. And as you can see on the cover, it's a library book, so it's really shiny, but it has kind of this gravestone that is covered in plants or ivy. In this book, we are following Makepeace, who she and her mother have been, I guess you could say, hiding out in a Puritan community. But after her mother is killed, she finds herself haunted by a ghost that she allowed into her body. So Makepeace can see ghosts, and oftentimes the ghosts seem to want to infiltrate her mind. So she has been spending years trying to figure out ways to protect herself. And at this new place, which is the home of her father, she is coming across more obstacles, more weird and dangerous events. It is so far a really great book. I'm 50% through it right now. Very haunting, very beautiful writing, and the story is incredibly unique. So for this book, I did a bit of a jump here because I didn't have any other books with creepy, tombstones on them or any sort of, decrepit structures or anything. So my thought process was, well, in, tombstones, they usually are above graves in which there are bodies. And so I took the plant and body aspect of this and decided to choose the antidote for everything. The antidote for everything is written by Kimmery Martin. And this is a book about a white woman, who is a urologist, and she is friends with another doctor. I can't remember if he was just a general doctor or if he had a specialty as well. But he is a queer man and they are really great friends. And one day the hospital that they both work at decides that they are no longer going to treat trans people. Her friend, of course, is like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna just, let my trans patients, die or suffer. So I'm gonna go ahead and just like keep treating them like a decent human being, please and thank you. And they fire him for that. Now I'm of course glad that this book covers that topic, because it's, relevant and it's very important. The thing that was a little bit confusing, to be honest, is that we followed the point of view of this white urologist who was not fired from her job, and also in the beginning didn't really interact with trans patients as much as her queer friend seemed to. This book also focuses a bit on a romance between her and a man. So it's kind of like, well, you know, we don't really need a romance in the story. I feel like it didn't really focus as much on the topic that I was hoping it would. But, you know, it does discuss it a little bit. So if you're interested in that topic at all, I would go ahead and suggest this book. All right, so after this book, I was thinking, let's go ahead and kind of stay with the human aspect of it, the flower aspect of it, and the queer rights aspect of it. So I went with the nonfiction book, All Boys Aren't Blue. This is a memoir manifesto written by George M. Johnson. And this, of course, is a nonfiction written for young adults, which makes it, I believe, a really great story to kind of start out with. Even if you're just starting out with nonfiction, you're trying to get into that field or genre of book, I should say. If you're new to, you know, queer nonfiction literature, this I thought was really easy to understand and digest. It was, I thought, really well written. I, you know, tabbed it up. I felt there was like a lot of important aspects to it. It was really personal for him, but would of course apply to a lot of people in his position, which are queer Black men. But of course, you know, we always want to read books from different voices to, you know, increase our empathy towards them, which is one of the reasons that I picked up this book. Another reason is because the cover is stunning and I have only heard wonderful things about it. So if you're interested in, you know, a young adult nonfiction story that is, you know, really personal and really moving, I would suggest this one. So I decided to, as far as the cover goes for this prompt, go ahead and continue with a queer person of color YA story with flowers on the cover, of course. And so I decided to go with Felix Ever After by Kaysen Calendar. So this is a YA story about Felix, who is a trans male teenager. He is attending high school and is hoping to become a artist. He is experiencing some harassment at school, and that someone has dead named him and has posted pictures of him before his transition. So he decides to try and figure out who did it so that he can go ahead and confront them. We also experience a romance between him and one of the other boys at school. I thought the story was a lot of fun. It was also really frustrating and of course upsetting because of the topic, which is transphobia, that it addresses. But I thought it had a really sweet ending, some important conversations, and overall made me feel very hopeful for the treatment of trans teens in a more open and, you know, kind society. All right, so I was looking at this cover and I was saying, okay, we have a Black boy on the cover. We have kind of, you know, him from his hips up with his arms by his side and some flowers all around him. So I went ahead and chose Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas to pick up next. So Concrete Rose is the prequel to The Hate You Give, which follows Star after she witnesses one of her friends being shot by a police officer because he mistook a hairbrush for a gun. This book follows her father, Maverick, and it explores his life while he's handling getting his girl pregnant. He is still in a gang at this point, and it discusses him trying to get out that. And it just, follows him during his teen years. As you know from The Hate U Give, he is no longer in the gang afterwards. Or at that time, and is a really staple part of the community. So it was really interesting to kind of watch this part of his life where there was a lot of changes happening. He was kind of reevaluating his future and the kind of man that he wanted to be. So I really enjoyed this book. I listened to the audiobook, which I've done with all of Angie Thomas's novels that I've read, including On the Come Up, and I always really enjoy those audiobooks. So if you have read The Hate U Give and really enjoyed it, I highly suggest picking up this book. All right, so looking at this cover, it is primarily red and with a little bit of like white and black. We have a character on the front who is appearing somewhat like intimidating. So I went ahead and picked up Scythe by Neil Shusterman. Let me kind of hold this in a less weird way. All right, so Scythe by Neil Shusterman. This is the first book in a trilogy. As we can see, we have like a robed figure with a scythe on it. So it's got the white and the black and the red and kind of a, standing tall and somewhat intimidating figure on it. This follows two teenagers who are selected by a Scythe to become his apprentice. Neither of them want this position, but that is, one of the qualifiers for becoming an apprentice. You shouldn't want to be one because you're going to be, required to kill people. And obviously they don't want someone who wants to kill people. So in this society, death naturally no longer occurs. If you jump off a building, they can regenerate you unless you're burned into, a pile of ash or your body is not found. They can always bring you back. But that, of course, means that, there isn't enough room on the planet for people to just keep living on forever. So they created an organization called the Scythedom, in which people go around gleaning people, which kills them for good. So they are responsibility for pretty much population control. So these two teenagers are kind of battling it out against each other. Whoever is not chosen to become a Scythe has to glean the other. So I thought this was an incredible trilogy. I have to admit I didn't love the second one as much, but really came through with the third book. The ending was absolutely stunning. This book has some incredible messages, especially when corruption starts to occur in the Scythedom, deciding who they should kill and who they should let live, dealing, discussions of what do people do when the people they love are killed and they know that, they'll continue to live on years and years without them. So I really, really enjoyed this series. It's, a sci-fi kind of, I would almost say slight utopia. If it weren't for the corruption within the Scythedom, it is pretty much a utopia because it is run by this artificial intelligence, which is really benevolent. So just a stunning series. If you haven't read it yet, get to it. All right. So for this one, I decided, we kind of have the color scheme still going on here. We have this figure that is kind of facing off to the side. So that kind of inspired my next selection, which is The Raven King, which is written by Nora Sakovic. This is the second book in the All for the Game series. As you can see, we have our two characters kind of facing off to the side. We kind of have the reddish themes. We also have him holding this kind of net, which is used for their sports, which is called XC, I believe is what it's called. And even the guy on the back has got kind of the the intimidating, looking off to the side, looking tough kind of thing. This series, this is the second in the book, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about the first, follows Neil, who is the son of a serial killer. He and his mom have escaped from his father and the organization that he works for, and have been on the run for years. At the beginning of the book, after a encounter with one of his father's men, his mother has unfortunately passed away and Neil is on his own. He joins a team in a small high school because he grew up playing this game, and he, obviously loves it a lot, and is recruited by a college team. He reluctantly joins because he knows that by joining this college team, he's putting himself into the spotlight. So throughout this entire series, Neil is kind of living like it's his last year. He's expecting to be dead by the end of this year. So that is how he is living. He is, a big member of this team. He's a really great player. He's trying to fix the other players' lives in a way, because he's like, well, if I'm gonna die, I might as well, leave things a little less messy than they are right now. This book is like really chaotic. It's got a really big fandom base, lots of fan art. So if you want to get into, a series with, lots of fan art, lots of fan fiction, things like that, you're definitely going to find it in this series. It is also incredibly queer, and it's just a mess. It's self-published. So go ahead and get your hands on it. These are not the original covers. I'll go ahead and comment the artist down below. I know I did that already in one of my other vlogs, I believe, maybe even the vlog that I posted this Monday, but definitely go ahead and check out their work. All right, so then next I decided to play off of the Raven aspect. Can you guess what book I'm gonna pull up? That's right, the Dream Thieves, which is part of the Raven cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. So I decided to go with this book instead of book one, because honestly, I think book one's kind of ugly. At least the version I have. I'm not a huge fan of it. So I decided to go ahead and go with book one, which kind of has, the sole character looking off to the side, with all the ravens around him. It's also kind of got a little bit of, the blackish colors, the reddish colors, even though this is more pinkish. But this series follows Blue, who is a daughter of a psychic, as well as the 4 Raven boys who attend a private boys' school in Blue's town. They all are in search of a dead Welsh king who is buried somewhere along the ley lines, and it is said that whoever finds this Welsh king is granted 1 wish. So we're following them on their journey to find this Welsh king, and just seeing them overcome all the obstacles that they are facing with other people trying to find the king before them, or even just, the usual high school drama that is occurring. So I'm absolutely loving this series. I'll be picking up the 3rd book this month, and am just really enjoying the writing and the characters. All right, so for this book, the next book is definitely a stretch. It's probably the biggest stretch that you're gonna see in this entire video. And the book I decided to go with was Homegoing by, I apologize, I'm probably going to butcher this, Gayasi. And the reason that I chose them was because I felt like these little bursts of, river grass, I don't know what this is, looks a lot like the burst of color that is coming from his chest. So those are the 2 things. We also kind of have the crows arching over him, and we have, the hills and the waves kind of you know, give me a break here. So this book is, I believe you could consider it a family saga because it follows generation after generation of people. We start out with two half-sisters who never meet each other, but one of them is married off to a white man who runs a slave operation in Africa, on the coast of Africa, and we also follow her half-sister in the following chapter. Each chapter follows a different person who gets sold into slavery and is shipped over to America. The way this is set up is chapter 1 and 2 follow the sisters, then chapter 3 follows the child of sister number 1, and chapter 4 follows the child of sister number 2, and then, you know, it goes in that pattern each time, following an ancestor, the next ancestor of each of those siblings throughout time, throughout place, which is an incredible concept, which is one of the reasons I picked up this book. But it was also one of the first books that made me realize that I don't like the short story setup. And these aren't really short stories. They are, in a way, sometimes continuing the stories of their ancestors, but we also have these breaks of years in between, and of course we're following a completely different person every time, so I had trouble connecting with the characters and their story because we spent so little time with them. But you know, if that is the setup of story, you know, a writing style or writing format that you really enjoy and you haven't read this book, then I highly suggest that you do so. All right, guys, we are on to the final book. The final book I chose because it was yellow. I don't have any other books in similar style to this, so I was like, it's yellow. I'm gonna go ahead and pick up another yellow book, and that is Sold. So, you know, you can see they're both yellow. They've both won awards, I'm pretty sure. That's a large print sticker, but I'm pretty sure that this has won awards. Also, I guess there's some red lettering on both covers if you want to be desperate. So Sold is a book that I read years ago, and I actually ended up rereading it last year just because I wanted to re-experience it. It is written, I don't know if you would consider this verse. Verse is more like poetry, and I don't really recall really considering this poetry, but it's not really written in the usual format of books, so I guess you could say maybe it is verse. So we follow a young girl who lives in Nepal, and her mother, I believe, remarried a man who is really terrible with money. So one day he decides, okay, we're gonna go ahead and have you work in town. So we're gonna sell you to this lady and you're gonna go be someone's servant. So she goes off with this lady. They travel to India where, let me see what her name is. Lakshmi? I hope I'm saying that correct. For Lakshmi, realizes that she's not going to be a servant, but a prostitute. So she is 13 years old. So the story does follow a 13-year-old who has been sold into sex slavery. And it follows her as she lives in this house and experiences life with the other girls that are there, as well as her hopes of escaping to hopefully maybe return home one day. Obviously, this story is really harrowing because this is something that really does occur. So, you know, it's an upsetting story, but I also think it's very important that we understand that there are really terrible experiences that people go through, and they should not just be kept in the shadows. We need to understand that they're happening so that they can be addressed. And that's what this story does. It is an older story. I'm trying to think when it was published. 2006, so it's an older story. But I still highly recommend it. It has won a National Book Award, or at least was a finalist. So yeah, it's a really quick read because of the way that it's set up. So, you know, if you have like a readathon or anything, or even if you don't have a readathon, go ahead and pick the story up. All right, guys, those are the 10 books that I was able to put together for this tag. I'm not going to tag anyone in it, but if you want to take part in it, of course, be my guest. Let me know down below what your favorite cover was, or if I talked about any books that you are interested in picking up. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!